do all our bindings in the studio by machine. And how we do it is we sew our bindings onto the back of the quilt, and then we bring the folded edge to the front of the quilt. And then we use a blind hem stitch, which on our machines here is number 7. It's straight with a bite, straight with a bite. I turn the width and the length down to 1.5. Your machines may have a different numbering system, but it's very tiny. I'm going to hand this around so you can see it. And I bring the fold over and I sew. And the straight of the stitch goes into the quilt, the bite goes into the binding. And you cannot see it when you use invisible thread, which is what I use. I use monofilament top and bobbin, and I do my bindings this way. It takes me about 45 minutes to do a king size quilt. The ruler helps you with, as I lose it, that helps you with this last seam when you're sewing your binding to your quilt. And I've done all of the math in the ruler, so you don't have to measure anything. You just have to have the right size. This is for 2.5, this is for 2 1/4. So what you do is you take your strip, you leave a 6 to 8 inch tail at the beginning, 6 to 8 inch tail at the end, and about 6 to 8 inches in the middle. That's just so you can get these 2 ends back under your machine to sew it. You don't need to measure it, just eyeball it. The ruler says readable side always up. That's so you don't accidentally do this. If you do this, just repeat your mistake on the other end and you'll be fine, okay? So you put this onto the bottom tail. You align the edge of the ruler with the edge of the strip and the top of the ruler with the top of the strip, and you cut the bottom angle, okay? Once we have our bottom angle cut, which is right here, so you can see it, all right? Once you have that cut, we need to cut the top angle. So you bring the top tail down, you open it up, and you bring the bottom tail up, and you don't do it in the air like this, and you put a straight pin in that top tail right where the bottom tail meets it, right where the tip meets it. Then you get rid of that and you open this up flat onto your cutting mat, and that's where these little cutting mats, I keep one by my sewing machine. It's really, really handy. You don't have to take the quilt to the cutting table, you can just do it at your machine. Then what happens when you put acrylic on a straight pin? It rolls. I've had them cut the groove in the ruler that is the same dimension as our thickest pin, and that keeps it from sliding left to right. It locks it in place, and then you can cut this cut right here. This is the most important cut because the math is between here and here, so we want that one to be accurate. So you cut straight down, take the pin out, and then you can cut the angle. Then you have your 2 tails left, and you take the 2 tails and you line them up. There's no dog ears, they just match up perfect end to end like that. You sew your 1/4 inch seam and it comes out perfect every single time. No math, no guess, and you just have to have the right tool for the right width of binding you're going to do. Any questions about binding? This is what happens when you've done thousands of quilts. The instructions, I have photographed every step of the binding, front and back, all the way through. There is a video on our YouTube page for the binding ruler, but sometimes you just can't get to a computer. You can also add your notes on there. It also tells you how to figure your yardage for a project. If you have a project you don't know how much binding you need, it gives you the formula for that. It talks about the machine binding. It talks about the French folds. So even if you know it and you want to teach it to somebody, this is a really good way to teach binding. And you can mark your stitch on the last page. So when you get home and you figure out which stitch you like for your machine binding, you just write it on the sheet, and that way you always have it with the directions.